This one's from LAJC, I believe. How do you get a travel companion visa for my 16-month-old twins for their first time to fly going to the U.S.? 16-month-old jet-setting twins. Wow, that is impressive. I'm trying to picture them strolling up to the airport counter without a traveling companion. It would be difficult. So you need someone to take those twins to the United States. Or, let me guess, you're traveling to the States with your twins, but you want to bring with you somebody who can help manage them, because it's a burden, of course, to manage 16-month-old twins on their first visit to the States. So let me presume that that's the circumstance. This is someone asking, how do I get a visa for a nanny, someone to childmind while we're in the United States, someone to assist me when I take my 16-year-old twins to Las Vegas for a night at the casino, or to Knott's Berry Farm in Los Angeles, or some family-friendly environment. That requires a visa, B1, B2, generally B1, because that's kind of for business or for temporary work in the United States. And the person who would be assisting you with those lovely children would solicit a visa appointment like anyone else, report to the consular section for an interview, and in the course of the interview, demonstrate that the purpose of his or her travel would be to attend to the children of her employer during the short stay in the United States that's planned. But let me throw in another wrinkle. In the United States, there are very strict labor laws. Most of you are aware of this. The wages in the United States reflect the income and standards of living in the United States, which are expensive. So we require that employees are paid a minimum wage. And even though the employment is generally in the Philippines, while in the United States, the employer and the employee are bound to abide by U.S. labor law. Curious. So, up to the window comes the nanny, who in this country is paid a wage that may or may not be generous by Philippine standards. When that nanny goes into the United States, U.S. labor law applies, and in most instances, the standard that she enjoys in the Philippines is significantly lower in terms of monthly income or hourly income than it is obliged to be in the United States. Therefore, she must present a contract signed by the employer that articulates what her wage will be while she's in the United States, states exactly how many hours per week she'll work, and promises to pay her premium pay if she exceeds those hours weekly, and cites a number of other conditions that correspond to U.S. labor law. All of those conditions are described at our website. So if you're in a situation where you want to bring your nanny to the United States for a visit so that you can mind those two lovely children, then go to the website and follow the links that describe how a helper qualifies for a U.S. visa. And you'll soon conclude that it's an expensive proposition, because in most states U.S. minimum wage approaches $9 or $10 an hour for a nanny, with premium pay for any work done on Saturdays, on Sundays, or after a normal 8-hour shift. It could be that the nanny ends up earning more than you. So have it in mind, it's not an easy obstacle to overcome. We wish that all nannies could travel to the States, just as we wish all Filipinos could travel to the States, but sometimes the resources that are likely to be available for the nanny are not going to be manifest in the presentation. So take a look very carefully at the contract requirements. Next tweet from Alia. What is the best example of strong ties to the Philippines? Well, there are many ways to demonstrate strong ties to the Philippines. We usually cite them as professional and personal. The personal ties would include your family. The professional ties, of course, your career, your studies, anything that would compel you vocationally to return. So who has the easiest time getting a visa? Probably a couple with reasonable incomes in both directions who are looking for a vacation that's not outside of their means. So they're making a reasonable salary between the two of them, and they want to take a trip to New York, and they both have good jobs here. That's probably a good instance. More typically, let me give you an example of a person who might have a harder time than that couple. Say the person is a single man, 24 years old, looking for fixed employment, working temporarily at a call center, for example, but not completely satisfied, with a cousin in New York City who's been there about 7 years and is also single, who's inviting him to come. Well, the cost of the ticket alone would approach a salary of more than a month for this traveler. So the interviewing officer would ask himself, is it reasonable for this young man to take a vacation that's going to cost him maybe 10% of his annual income just for the airfare alone? And for most of us, that wouldn't be reasonable. So the officer would suspect that the true intention of this young professional might be to integrate into the underground economy in New York City and work under the table, making more money than he would have made in the BPO industry, and possibly staying for an indefinite period of time. So the ties there would be thin. Even if you had family ties, the professional ties for a 24-year-old might be too stretched for the officer to find a way to approve it. So I hope that explains it a bit. I know it's a vague concept, strong ties to the country, but when you think about it, what we're talking about really are things that you would not trivially abandon, things that you remain committed to and would not leave behind simply for an opportunity to work in an underground economy. So this one comes from JP, and it says, "Good afternoon, sir. I just want to ask if there's an expiration date on the visa application fee." The visa fee, as you know, is $140 for the application. So if you're talking about a visitor's visa, you pay your $140. I believe you have to use that application fee within the fiscal year, within a 12-month period, not the fiscal year exactly, but the calendar year, within a 12-month period of having solicited the application. But, you know, I might be wrong on that. And if you need to ask the question again, if this answer doesn't satisfy you, I invite you to send an email with that particular inquiry to Cons Manila NIV, C-O-N-S Manila NIV at state, S-T-A-T-E .gov. Cons Manila NIV at state.gov. For most people, this issue isn't a serious one because they apply for the visa at the time that they pay for it and they're seen within a week or two. But if you're talking about a non-immigrant visa, I don't want to give you wrongful information. I believe that the receipt is valid for a year, but you can check with us again by sending in the email. With the immigrant visa process, again, people generally don't spend too much time between the time they pay the fee and the time they get interviewed, so I don't think it's an issue in that category. Now, I remind you, of course, the visa fee for a non-immigrant visa appointment really pays for the interview. It doesn't pay so much for the visa as the experience of the interview, because about 20 years ago, the U.S. Congress mandated that the State Department begin charging fees that reflect the cost of the service. So what happens is they calculate the value of an officer's time, the value of the time spent processing the visa with the preliminary information and the intake, the guards, the space, and they come up with a figure that must be paid by the applicant, since Congress ordered that this process be self-financing. Hence, we have visa fees. Some of the old-timers remember back before the 1990s, there was no fee at all attached to a U.S. visa application. You could apply for nothing. Many people have tweeted, "Is my IV petition still valid?" I'm not certain exactly what that means, but I know many people are waiting for their petitions to become current. If you have a communication from the U.S. Immigration Service, whichever one it might have been, because the names of these organizations have changed over the years, but if you have a document from the U.S. Immigration Service saying that the petition for an immigrant visa benefit for you, whoever you may be, has been approved, then your petition remains valid. The petition is valid until you are summoned for your interview. If you're in the dark about whether or not you are still in the queue, say, for example, you've heard me say that a spouse should wait about 14 years before being summoned, and you've been waiting 16 years, if you're in the dark, then you are welcome to send us an email to the following address, IV Manila Replies, the letter I, the letter V, the word Manila, the word replies, REPLIES, no spaces between those letters, at state, STATE, .gov. IV Manila replies at state.gov, simply saying, for example, can you confirm for me that I'm still in the queue? I've been waiting 16 years, and I understand the priority date should have passed a couple years ago. And we'll be happy to oblige and happy to respond to you. And if there's any problem, we'll help you straighten it out. We have a tweet from Michael Carrillo. Hi, good day. I just wanted to ask, how long does a working visa get processed? Of course, there are a number of categories of visas. Besides tourist visas, there are what some people refer to as working visas. Usually those are H categories. Those are people going up to the States to fill a specific labor need defined by the U.S. Department of Labor, preceded by a labor petition in the United States filed by the employer. So this is not something that anyone listening today could simply decide to solicit through the embassy. They would have to be the beneficiary of a specific petition filed by a U.S. employer. For example, Microsoft Corporation files petitions every year for technologically savvy people from around the globe to come and work 1 year, 2 years, 3 years for Microsoft. That's one of the more notable instances of working visas. How long does it take for us to process? No time at all. Once you have your appointment, of course, you'd have to have the petition in place, and we'd have to have it sent to us through the electronic system. Then you would appear for your interview. The officer would confirm that, in fact, you're eligible for the visa, and you would receive your visa through the courier service like everybody else within a few days of the interview. There's no further processing of a work visa than there might be for a regular visa. In fact, all of the work is done before you get to the interview window. I hope that helps you. So we have a question, a tweet from Kevin. Will I be accommodated if I walked into the embassy to apply for the renewal of my U.S. passport? So we have a citizen question, which gives me an opportunity to get up on my platform and remind all our viewers that as carefully as we want to attend to all the visa issues in the Philippines, and again, I repeat, we very much want you to understand the visa process. We hope that you can apply for a visa and qualify for one, travel to the States, spend lots of money, keep our economy's revival going. We have to revert to another principle, which is the basis for our embassy's presence here: service to American citizens. So an American citizen has just asked a question about renewal of his U.S. passport. It gives me the occasion to remind all our viewers and listeners that citizen services are our first priority. And I hope I can respond to this person's question when I tell you that all passport services, except emergency passport services, are managed by appointment. So please go to our website, seek the links regarding passport renewal, and you will find out exactly how to go about renewing your U.S. passport. Why is it that we don't allow you simply to stroll up to the compound in order to solicit renewal of your U.S. passport? Because you could well imagine the chaos that could ensue if scores of people showed up on the same day and, for example, we were understaffed due to a rash of illnesses or staffing gaps or any other such thing. The appointment system suits everyone. You know exactly when you're going to be seen. You know your visit will be attuned to the resources available that day. You can come in comfortably knowing you're not going to be waiting for hours and hours. You're going to be seen within a reasonable time. Your business will be concluded, and you'll be on your way. So take advantage of the appointment system. It's served us marvelously. You can tell by looking at me, I've been around for a long time, and I worked in the system before there were appointments, and sometimes it was very challenging. Many of the old-timers listening today can recall the days before appointments in the visa lines, in the visa system, and the hordes of people that amassed on Rojas Boulevard threatened the security of the area and the sidewalk and made everybody even more miserable thinking about the need to go to the embassy to get a visa. Now we have appointments for all processes, and we think the system works very well. So we have a tweet from Angela Bueno. I am married to a U.S. citizen. We want to adopt a 2-year-old kid in the Philippines. What is the process? Well, you would be, I hope, pleased to know that the Philippines is an outstanding manager of international adoptions. The Philippines is one of the countries in the region that is a signatory to the Hague Convention on International Adoptions. What does that mean? That means that in the Philippines there will be no sanctioned child trafficking through illegitimate adoptions, through questionable attorneys, through dubious adoption agencies, because the government has undertaken to scrutinize every step of the process, and it signed an international convention agreeing to do so and stipulating terms that all interested parties must abide by in order to complete an adoption. The United States applauds this initiative on behalf of the Philippines and looks to the Philippines as a model for countries in the region that are contemplating similar activity, because, as you've probably heard in different instances of celebrity adoptions, there are some agencies, some attorneys, some venues where children, in fact, are not available for adoption because their parents are still alive, but somehow they have fallen into a queue for adoption and their destiny is very unpredictable. So you want, I know, to follow procedures in such a way that your process is transparent and your child is genuinely adopted and is genuinely an orphan. So how do you go about adopting a 2-year-old? Your first step is to contact the Philippine agencies responsible for this. And that you'll find on the internet if you type in the Philippine Adoptions Social Welfare, and they'll connect you to the links that describe the process. It's not too different from adoption in the United States, but because the adoption is going to be coordinated across international borders, there are a few steps that you need to attend to very carefully. We work very closely with the Philippine government, and we don't process an enormous number of visas to the United States for adopted children, but we do manage several dozen a year, and we're very pleased when they succeed because we know that there's nothing questionable about the process, and the child is having his best interests served through the adoption, and no one is being sold or trafficked through an illicit activity. So do take note of that and type into the search engine the words Philippine adoptions, and up will come the links that will help you pursue your family interest. I want to remind everybody that this video will be posted on YouTube later, so if you could not tune in live, you'll still be able to watch it later. This will live forever. I hope that I'm making myself clear in these presentations, and I'm not asked to sing or juggle or anything like that, because I would hate for any of that to live forever. But I hope these questions do help to clarify the process. And we have yet another question. This one's from @Pinoy. Do we have to pay for our second interview, or can we refund at least half of the payment? Well, the bad news is, actually most people like to hear the good news first. The good news is, if you are refused a visa, you are free to apply again. If you are refused a second time, you are welcome to apply a third time, etc. You can apply as many times as you wish. We don't encourage that, of course. We encourage people to consider the likelihood of issuance, the reality of eligibility, and to respond to the officer's instructions and consider waiting before you apply yet again if you don't appear to be qualified the first time, especially the second time. The bad news is every instance, as I said before, must be self-financing. So if you're going to come to the interview window, you're going to have to pay for that access because it costs us. When you appear at the interview window, of course, you're generating expenses that the U.S. taxpayer has insisted you pay for. So in order to engage the officer's time, the time of the local national superstructure, everything connected to the process, the Teslin foil that eventually goes into the passport, the applicant has to pay. It's been calculated based on the number of applications worldwide that process costs $140 a pop. So every time you come before the window, unless you've been asked by us to come back, you're going to have to pay for the process. So yes, the second interview costs the same as the first. I wish for your sake it was different, but for the sake of my fellow taxpayers, I can appreciate why the cost is imposed.